He's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the Getting Lit podcast. Last episode, we spoke to Matthew Gazda about his new novel, The Sleepers. And this week, we are talking to Tobe Ellen from the upcoming, very much anticipated Barrow podcast. Welcome aboard.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and you have been on this show before talking about Julia Paradise, so you can go back. We talked about that in a pub, I believe.
Yeah,
and
that's my name.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we'll go through a little bit of a for those of you who haven't listened to that episode and don't want to scroll back. Introduce yourself, Tobe. What's your story? How did you get here?
How did I get here? Well, I don't know. I ask myself that every day. Like, how did I get here? I was writing. I had that terrible urge, that terrible need that some people have, that sort of, some people are afflicted with, to write. And then I was at uni for a long time, for too long. Started teaching writing, and then wrote a book of my own, which I don't really talk about anymore. That's been banished to history. And
are you ashamed of your book, or is it just like that? It was a moment in time that you just left behind.
It's a moment in time. I don't think it really existed then. It doesn't exist anymore. So, but anyway, I ended up moving home during COVID and sort of reuniting with my mother. And out of that experience, we ended up doing a lot of like talking and about, family history and things that having conversations that we hadn't had before, and conversations that probably were well overdue. And that process led into writing a memoir together, which has led into creating a podcast together. And the podcast is kind of, I keep thinking that this is I don't want to look it up because I don't want to if I'm deluded, that's okay. I keep thinking that, this is the first ever mother and son memoir that's been written. And that may not be true, but I don't want to find out that that's not true. But if it's not, then it's certainly the first podcast, mother and son podcast, about the process of writing a mother and son memoir. So there's got to be a first in there somewhere.
It doesn't, it doesn't seem like a very common thing at all. So I do think you're probably onto something, that it's the first one. So give us an idea of what to expect. So this is dropping in a couple of weeks from when we're recording, right? So end of June, isn't it?
End of June, June 22, Sunday will be the first episode. And
so so is it? It's all about the process of both of you writing a memoir together. And is there is it like a joint authorship thing where you're both writing as one voice, or is it alternating voices, and how are you is it sort of almost like a podcast in that way? Is the memoir itself a conversation too?
Yeah, it kind of is, I think. Obviously we're still in the process of writing it, so it's hard to answer all those questions. But one of the things, well, first of all, in terms of the podcast, I mean, it's just regular conversations that we're having about family and dysfunctional family, divorce, mental illness, all that sort of great stuff. And the conversation is kind of being prompted along by where we're up to in the writing process. Okay.
Mhm.
And we sort of alternate between like a conversation between us, and then on every second episode we look at a memoir, we look at a book. So we do a kind of a it's kind of a book review, but it's not. We just kind of use a memoir that we've read recently as a prompt to continue our conversation. So we kind
Yeah.
of have that aspect of like looking at books on the show, but I don't want to. It's not a book show, really.
Mm,
It's a show
mm,
about relationships and family. Um,
mm.
in terms of the memoir itself, like it's been really hard to figure out. Voice is really difficult, right? So like, and it's hard enough when you're a sole author, but doing a joint project, co-authoring something. I mean, like, I never thought I'd co-author anything, and then, but to be co-authoring with a parent is really weird. Like, it's a really strange thing. Um, it's a split voice, so it does bounce back and forth between my voice and mum's voice. Um, I guess baked into the memoir itself is actually the process of writing it, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
when I moved home, mum was kind of, I mean, we were both not in a good way mentally, like we were like sort of quite depressed, and and there was just sort of the house was just kind of falling apart, and the garage was filled with boxes of, everybody's got, a shed or a garage at the filled with some boxes that they haven't looked in, and probably need to at some point. And you usually don't get to those until somebody dies. But we or I started the process of actually having a look at what was on the property and what mum had been hanging on to. And it was kind of like a lifetime's worth of crap, really. I mean, like in that process, I found boxes that belonged to my father, and he had left when I was 3, right? So you've just got stuff hanging around for like 35 years, um, which it kind of felt haunted, like there was the presence of all this stuff that nobody had really talked about, still inside the home in a literal way in terms of the material stuff. But, the presence of all that was kind of infecting the atmosphere of the house. And that was really the impetus to start writing was like, let's have a look at what's here. And, you know, as we started looking in those boxes and started tidying up the property, it became pretty clear that there was a lot of family, you know, um, whatever you want to call it, family baggage, that needed to
Mm.
be addressed. And so it all sort of came together where it was like there was literal physical materials that needed sorting, there was material for a book, and then there was stuff to talk about. So
Mm.
the podcast developed out of a process that, you know, originally I just thought I was writing a book. I didn't think I was making a podcast. But I started recording conversations with mum because it was sort of like a way to do research. Um, and then that turned into, well, some of these are quite funny and some of these are quite good. Like we should take that more seriously, that aspect of it. So that's how that began. Um, but really, in terms of the memoir itself, uh, over the years, I was really trying to coax a story out of mum. And so since about 2022, 21, 22, I've been really encouraging her writing. And she sort of ended up with a manuscript of, oh, I don't know where it was. It was sort of 40 to 60,000 words or something. Um, and that was like her story that I got on the record. Um, and I guess the final product of the memoir, which, it hasn't been finished yet, but it would be including my story and adding that alongside her story. what we've kept finding is that our stories are strangely aligned. They're strangely similar. Like her experience of childhood is my experience of childhood. And because of the way that our family dynamic changed, which was that after mum's divorce, she and I moved in with her parents, we were essentially kind of raised by the same people. So there was this kind of like echoing thing that's happened, which hasn't really been the healthiest thing. But it's it's certainly provided good material. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I like that dynamic as well, like because it's the mother-son dynamic, and you've like almost concretized it in a book, in a memoir. But it's also very unique, like you said, in that you're almost like you're both raised by the same people. So that's a unique part of it as well. And so I think the mother-son dynamic is something that's not actually explored very much, particularly in and if it is, it's not very complicated. You know, it's like it's very very archetypal and things like that. Whereas, you know, in modern contemporary fiction memoir, it's more like mother-daughter relationships, things like that, but father-son relationships. But very rarely do you have that kind of maternal and son kind of dynamic.
I find mothers and sons interesting because it's like particularly single moms and sons, because it's like it's a as you say, it's usually when it's delivered, it's really quite simplistic. But it's super fucking complicated. And like I think sons of single mothers, like I mean, I don't want to talk about gender because I'm gonna blow my brains out if we talk about gender. But like, you know, that's so much of the conversation these days, right? And I think that a perspective from sons of single moms, perhaps, could be part of that conversation. I think it could be a unique position because it's like, you know, you fall into a position where you sort of take on being the quote unquote man of the house at a young age, and that can be quite difficult. And you know, if you're looking at a parent to learn gender from, and you know, it affects your relationships, it goes into all sorts of aspects of your life. And yeah, I don't hear people talking about that much, and I thought some of that stuff's interesting. And yeah, there's quite a bit. My cat has come into the room and is
That's all right.
brushing.
Wouldn't be the first time a podcast guest has had their cat come into the room.
He got into a little fight yesterday, and he came home. I'm going to talk about my cat for 5 minutes, okay?
That's all right.
He came home yesterday. It was really raining. Was it raining heavily where you were yesterday? Yeah. So usually he goes out, and if it's wet, like I leave the garage door open for him, and he goes in. But someone had closed the garage. It might have been me. I don't know. We've got the dryer out there. And so I think he must have gone and sheltered somewhere where he wasn't welcome. And he came home, and I thought he was just dirty, like muddy. But I picked him up and I was like, "Oh, you're all muddy. You're all wet. This is horrible." And I was like saying to my girlfriend, I was like, "He smells like soil." And she's like, she comes over and takes a whiff and starts gagging. She's like, "It's not soil." And I realized that he is caked in shit. And then I start really looking at him, and a bit of his scalp at the back behind his ear has like it's knocked off. It's just hanging back like a flower. And so I don't know. He got it. Yeah, he was in a pretty bad way. So I found myself in my underwear in a shower with my cat, cleaning shit from him. That was my day yesterday. These are the kind of wacky things that happen in my house. Yeah, anyway, what was I saying? I think, yeah, you're right. Like it's overly simplistic between parents. but parents and children. Those dynamics are often way too simple. And I think that if you're not in a really clear-cut parent-child dynamic, and my mother and I weren't like it, and that's what I mean about talking about single mothers is like if a parent is absent from the house, the dynamic shifts, right? And people sort of fill other roles and that kind of thing. But also in our unique circumstances, my father had left, but then when we moved back with mum's parents, mum stopped really being my mum and sort of became more like a sibling, like an older sister to me in that environment. So the dynamic between us is it's mother and son, but it's been, surrogate boyfriend, girlfriend, and it's been sibling, and it's been all sorts of other things, which has caused a lot of confusion. And it's sort of strained the relationship. But it's been a good source for conversation. And, people don't have, for the most part, like, I don't know tons of people that grew up in like a strictly nuclear happy family, like, and yet we still kind of rely on those kind of myths and narratives that we have about family to have conversations about them, and they're largely kind of bullshit. So all of that has been prompt for material for talking, and as well as for the yeah.
Yeah. I love the idea of like tying a podcast project to it though, because as far as I know as well, like I think the idea is something that is not actually often taken up by authors. I think because there's a whole, which you would probably have learned over the past few months, there are a whole lot of other skills that you have to learn to do a podcast. And I've learned these as well. But there is I don't know why more people don't do it, because it's like, it allows you to sort of, I mean, you're going to have conversations about things you're writing anyway. So it's just like, you can just put that out there and people seem to find it interesting. I remember a few years ago, there was a podcast. It's very different from what you're describing here, but there was a podcast called After On. So AFTERON. And it was sort of like he'd written, the podcast host had written this book, which was sort of like a near future kind of futurist kind of book about like technology and Silicon Valley and things like that. Okay. And what he did was he did this. I don't know if it's still going. I think it is actually. He went beyond because I think initially he was going to do the publicity, 2-week publicity, not 2 weeks, but you know what I mean, like a couple of months publicity kind of blitz. But then he kind of went beyond that and sort of took different themes or different technologies and that are in the book and explored them in the podcast, like unfurled them a little bit more in the podcast, which I always thought that was like such an interesting idea. And like, I don't know why more authors don't do this, because and then what he would do as well is that he would like read a little bit from the book as well in like the Patreon sections or whatever. That's awesome. That's exactly, I thought that's very entrepreneurial. I like that.
It's fantastic. Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're doing, is that we're in the process of setting up a Substack and a paid tier, and we'll be reading the work in progress, little excerpts from it behind the paywall. But I completely agree. And since beginning this, it's given me so much clarity about what I want to do going forward. Like, because every book is, it's like the first. It's really like a gateway to like much bigger discussions about all sorts of stuff. I mean, like I've just got like really simple little genre books that I want to write, and I'm like, yeah, all the stuff that informs you that goes into the book, you can like use that as prompts for bigger discussions for something like a podcast or a video series even. Like there's tons of aspects of local history that inform like some of the genre pieces I want to work on. And I'm like, yeah, but they're worthy of attention in their own right. Like, I'd like to just,
Mm.
hunt down, local figures and, the research that you do for a book is so meaty and dense.
Mm.
Even,
Mm.
regardless of what you're writing, there is always a research phase on some kind of level.
Yeah.
And as you say, that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, utilize that. You should mine that research and make art out of that. I mean, you kind of have to now. But
Yeah.
writers are very,
Mm.
writers are selfish and lazy for the, for the
And also they're like the last kind of artists like left who will not submit to that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, that like
yeah.
DIY kind of like just put it out there, make some money from it, don't like wait for the mountain to come to Muhammad thing. Like writers are very like just passive. They don't
Because they've spent their
like
entire life like worshipping at the altar of that kind of pedestal of traditional publishing, and
yeah. It's
they're
not the same
desperate.
thing anymore though. Like it doesn't exist anymore.
It does and it doesn't. Like, I agree that it doesn't,
Yeah.
right? But I think, most writers, they won't have this kind of wake up moment until they've had that first book published. And then once they have, they
Mm.
realize that it's absolutely meaningless and they need to go and generate more. Not generate more like in a kind of a crass, social media content kind of a way, but just like, you need to generate a bit more than your book. And you already have like all the ideas that are in your head,
Mm.
the whole um, craft process that you've gone through to make it happen. Like, all of that is, it's interesting to people. That's the other thing is, I think writers are uniquely inept at identifying what audiences really are interested in. Like,
Hmm.
they're so kind of like caught up in my book, my idea, the way I want to do it, right? Which, to be fair, is like, it's a mindset that's almost a prerequisite for writing a book anyway. Like, you have to have that kind of,
Mm.
you have to have that kind of narrow view of the world to do it, right? Like, you have to be deluded enough to believe that what you're saying matters and that it's going to make a difference. Like, if you didn't believe
Yeah.
that, you wouldn't start, and it'd just be too hard.
Well, what I hate about like writers is when like clearly like that's true. You do have to believe that, but then everyone does the small bean. Oh, please read my little old book. Like, and just are very humble about their work in like a really fake way, performative way that I just really gets on my nerves. It's just like, no, you wrote a book and obviously you think it's good. So you should not deny that it's good. Don't hide behind layers of like irony and like self-effacement, because I know writers and I know that they are vain and they think their shit is good and they want to sell it. And so that's why all the writers I respect are the ones that say it openly, who are like, this shit is good, buy it. Not like, oh, my little old book sort of thing. I hate that attitude so much.
Yeah, that's a really cultivated thing. I mean, that's kind of a result, I
Mm.
think, of like, I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, the kinds of personalities that get published now,
Mm.
which come out of kind of like usually an academic background, and there's a lot of false humility and this performative etiquette around being nice and
Not rocking the boat. Yeah,
not
sure.
rocking the boat and being politically correct and all that crap. So it's sort of all tied in with that, I think. I mean, I saw a keynote speaker at something. I'll do an episode on this one day, but like, I never go to writers events, and this is years and years and years ago. And it's like one of the experiences, one of the rare experiences I had with a writers event that solidified my rule not to attend them. And it was a keynote speaker on the most important thing about being a writer is being nice. not talent, not voice, not ability, nothing. Just being nice, not integrity, not um, it's all about being nice, and we all have to be nice because we're all in it together, and it's an industry, and you've got to, hey, if you're nice to people, that might be the person that edits you next time, and it's like, oh, shut the fuck up! Like this is obnoxious.
Mm,
Like this is what you
mm.
brought to a keynote speech. Nice, fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Uh,
you know,
have you seen those people who have the stickers that's like a rainbow and it says "Be nice" or like magnets of that? Like,
it's like people who
usually
have.
it's usually like queer unicorns who have it, but like every single person I have seen who has had that like sign or sticker or whatever, who I've known has been an absolute shit cunt. Like they have just been like the worst possible person, and they're just like they've got "be nice" on the thing, and it's just like it's just too perfect. Like
Right.
niceness is very. I've always said that niceness is different to kindness. Niceness
Oh,
is
for sure.
deception in my world, but I prefer the word kindness because someone who's nice is like a snake essentially.
Well, it's surface level behavioral stuff, right? Like, I mean, you can be
Mm,
really gruff and sort of, speak in a rough kind of way and still be a very kind
mm,
person deep down. Like
mm,
but again, like I don't want to get too much into like the fall of academia and the fall of all this stuff is that like, people like lost sight of um, deeper meanings, second, that kind of deeper layer of interpretation and analysis and all that sort of stuff. Everything is just whatever's happening on the surface. It's like a joke, right? A joke is now about whatever is described in the joke. It's not,
mm,
it's usually a joke is made maybe at the expense of what's described, but the joke is about something else. It's about a bigger thing.
mm.
It's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, this book has the depiction of, I don't know, something awful in it. It's an awful book. Well, no.
Mm,
Like just
mm.
a little further. Like, it's all that
Mm.
stuff. Right? Like, I think that's all tied into this on some level,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah,
And just this whole, yeah, I just really, I've talked about this like so many times, but it bears repeating that like, yeah, writers have this, kind of aversion to doing what's necessary, in this new media world to like, offer something else as well. Because like you said, I think that's a really good point that you made that when you write a book, you do, even if it's about like, like if it's semi-autobiographical, right? You still have to research sort of details about. I'm sure you did this when you wrote your book. Research details about where you grew up and all sorts of shit like that. Um, and so you've got all this like wealth of knowledge that it's just sitting there. Like you used it in the book, but like you could double up that and like use it in
absolutely.
something else and bring that to the table. Even if it's not like making a separate thing, it's like bringing that to something else, like a conversation or a short story or like some other form that you can use to sort of get your tendrils out there, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like, it might not even take the form of traditional research, but like, just if you write about a particular era of your life, you tend to go back and, you pull out or you dust off that CD that you haven't listened to since you were 16, or you
Mm.
gravitate back to that. And sorry, I've just got to let the cat out now.
No, that's all right.
Or you go and you rewatch that movie that meant so much to you at an earlier stage, and you find out that it was, actually really terrible, and you're sort of embarrassed by your taste. But, that's at least enough to generate maybe an article about that. Like,
Mm.
like, hey, I had this experience of I went back and I listened to this CD and it turns out it's really terrible and I can't believe I had that taste. You know, Um, all of that generates something else. And if you can't see that, you really just shouldn't be making art at all. Like, you just shouldn't be part of it. Like,
Mm.
I think that's the other thing is like we say, oh, writers, are lazy. I think there is a lot of really untalented writers. And it's like that,
Mm.
yeah, you can string a sentence together because you were just that little bit smarter than everybody around you in high school. Big deal. Like, it's not,
Mm.
you know, there's a difference between writing a book and being an artist, being an actually creative person, you know,
Mm.
which
Yeah, the older I get, and the more I read and experience a lot of these writers, is that I almost think that it's not actually about talent. It's actually more about mindset or mentality, even like spirituality in a way. Like,
100%.
does this person have like um spirit, or like chutzpah, or like do they have that quality, like, which is very different. It's not even necessarily tied to talent. When it is tied to talent, it's amazing, but like in
Yes.
in and of itself, it's not. I don't think it is actually a talent thing. It's more just yeah. It's about the spirit. That's all I can say about it. It's not something like tangible that you can kind
I
of
couldn't agree.
measure,
I
I don't
couldn't
think.
agree more. I couldn't agree more. That's like
Mm.
100% what I think. Yeah, it really is like a mentality, and it's a how you come to life spiritual thing. Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Um,
Mm. Yeah, how you come to life. That's a great way of putting it,
and
actually.
and
Mm.
writing a book or even several books, it's not necessarily, it doesn't go hand in hand with anything. I mean, it's a skill, you know,
Mm.
and but yeah, there is more to it than just that one skill.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I always say, when I'm talking to J. David Osborne, it's like we're always saying that you have to actually get, like, be willing to get absolutely retarded, and like just let all like your ideas of like being a prestigious, respected author sort of just go, so you can just let go of that and not let that be guiding your spirit as you kind of create your work. And I think that's part of it as well. That's part of the difference I see.
that that makes me think of one thing in particular, which is, and this sounds really corny, but it's love. Like, you've got to love literature.
Mm.
You've got to love your idea. And when I say literature, I don't mean canon, big L literature. I just mean, you got to love books. You got to love writing.
Stories, yeah,
And
yeah.
and I see a lot of people in spaces like arts organizations, publishers, and stuff who do not love writing. They don't.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the kind of um, instinct to censor other people and to, you know, um, I don't know, politicize everything about a book and about a person, and even to politicize the process of writing. It's like you can't love it. You mustn't. In
Mm.
fact, I think you hate it. Like,
Mm.
you've contaminated this really beautiful thing with politics and ideology and a very contemporary sense of things. I mean, like, how you come to the world as a writer, to me, if you have real empathy, you understand that people just think different things. So jumping into that space and trying to sort of like control who gets to speak and how a book's written and all that sort of stuff. It's like I just see people who hate writing. They hate
Mm.
art. They hate writing. And yet their whole identity is about
Mm.
being a writer or being an artist. And it's like, no, you hate all of this. You
Mm.
hate other people. You
There
especially
was.
hate the working class.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. That's a whole other can of worms we could go down. But this reminds me actually of something that did the rounds recently on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. Where, I don't know if you saw this, but you're just dipping your toes back into like social
Yeah,
media and
social
stuff.
media.
So, but like, it was a video from the TV show Girls. Which, have you watched that? I
I
I
have
think
watched Girls.
yeah, I think Lena Dunham's an amazing writer, and
Yeah, me too.
this is why actually this scene, because it's the scene where Adam finds out this woman, it's not Lena Dunham, it's some other woman that he gets involved with, like in one of the later seasons, has just like unilaterally decided to get an abortion. And she's just very cold about it and just like doesn't want to argue. And then like he gets really pissed off and whatever. And there was all this back and forth about it, like how, so you had like the, you know, the dumb conservatives being like, this is just, you know, propaganda for pro-abortion propaganda. And then you had like the smarter people kind of, and, you know, smart liberals and conservatives sort of saying, no, there's more nuance to this scene. Like clearly Lena Dunham is pro-abortion because she's that kind of woman, but the scene is written in a way that she understands where Adam is coming from, and his motivations and his reaction is completely human and understandable. And she has at that level of empathy. That's why she's a great artist, because she might have her political views, but she doesn't like necessarily impose them artificially onto, you know, a scene or characters or things like that. And that, I think that is a crucial difference, you know, like that she can write people that she doesn't agree with, but understands. Like you need to be able to do that, but none of these people can, because they do not have it. They do not have the juice.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, like most of the people I see talking about empathy and the need for more of it are the least empathetic people on earth. Like, you know, true empathy allows you to challenge your own opinions, right? Empathy is not wearing a badge and like screaming support for a minority group on the internet. Like that's not empathy. That's like just bizarre behavior, to be honest. Like it's just weird. And no, there really is not much practiced empathy. And in fact, I think empathy makes people really fucking uncomfortable. Like, oh, what? I mean, if you look at basic art spaces and publishing houses that talk about inclusivity and diversity, and yet exclude one entire half of the political spectrum, it's like you're an idiot. Like it's just so silly, you know.
Yeah, but they think they're, I guess, justified in doing that, because I guess their justification would be that that half of the political spectrum does not have empathy or whatever, which is just like a misunderstanding. Like that's like it's a kind of vicious cycle too, because they don't understand the other side, so they think they project all of this stuff onto it that's not there, you know.
But it's like discounting it by saying it's essentially not human. Like there's no empathy to be had because these people aren't people, and it's like, well, you know, I mean, obviously that's a massively slippery slope. But yeah, no, I just find it. I mean, this is a topic that's been done to death, but the inability for people to have real conversations now is it's extraordinary, really. You know, it's frightening. And
well, especially on like podcasts, I think that's why podcasts have like exploded in popularity, because it's pretty much the only place where you can find people having real conversations that are extended. No, I mean, some podcasts are very heavily edited and produced and shit like that. But I'm talking about this style podcasts and, you know, podcasts in this sort of milieu, which is just like long form conversations about art and life and shit like that, where not really edited, not really censored, and just people are being themselves and like having their kind of organic kind of reactions to things and bouncing off each other in a way that's just like, it's not, you cannot find it anywhere else in the media. So I think that's why the podcast form has sort of exploded in the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really why Mum and I started what we're starting, is because, you know, there were lots of conversations we felt people weren't having, or whenever we saw conversations becoming, a little bit nuanced or whatever in mainstream media, it would just kind of, there'd either be it either just wouldn't go far enough, there wouldn't be the space to go into that kind of stuff, and or you would get that kind of backlash, overreaction from other people, and the few kind of here in Australia, the few kind of shows or spaces that I thought were doing a reasonable job of, nuance and debate, they started to change. And I'm thinking about the ABC a little bit here. Like there was one show that got axed in particular that started to get just progressively kind of too politicized, I thought. Like it wasn't, do you know what I'm talking about? The Drum.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was a pretty good show, and then it started to get a bit strange, I thought, towards the end. And I don't know, it does feel like there is just no space for people to just be human and have what, to my mind, are just, pretty normal conversations. I think what bothers me is that there seems to be a sense that so much is at stake when people talk, and there kind of just isn't. You can just say stuff, and you can also walk it back. The whole point of having a conversation is to sort of calibrate your own sense of things. Well, I feel this. Someone says, well, no, I hear you, but that actually makes me feel this. And you go, oh, okay, well, I'll move a bit more to the left, or I'll move a bit more to the right. Not politically, but just, and it's the act of conversation is really generative, but then it's not being treated that way. It's being treated like, if you speak, you're at risk of hurting me, and it's just weird. I don't know what happened. It's just.
I think it's because in a lot of this stuff as well, where these conversations are happening, are in non-institutional spaces. So they're it's one guy or whatever, and Joe Rogan's just a guy, it's not a whole university / media company or whatever. But I think when it's institutionalized, there's a lot of people with a lot of different jobs, and I think HR and the PR team feel the need, because they have a job, to always respond to every kind of crazy criticism as well. Yeah. That's an element of it as well. And to me, I'm just just ignore these people. Especially if they're not picking up what you're putting down, and they're taking it in the worst possible light. They are beneath you. Do not acknowledge them, because that's exactly what they want. And that's what I do. So we don't cop much flack, but sometimes when we do, I'm just not even going to acknowledge it. But there's this idea, and I've seen it. I've been in institutions where this has happened, where some controversy has blown up, and usually the PR team or the higher ups or whatever are we have to respond to this. And it's is there a legal threat? No. Yeah. Then you don't have to respond to it. Just ignore it and it'll go away, but people just do not have the stomach to ignore it or something. They feel there's some important issue. I'm talking about specific, controversies and stuff like that, which is not the whole, it's not the whole of what the problem, but they just won't just let it burn out, and it will, in most cases.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the idea of ignoring something is in itself seen as it's never an appropriate response. And it's sometimes it is. Sometimes you just ignore something. Not because problems go away if you ignore them, but some problems need to be met with not acknowledging them. Um, and again, don't take that and run that, completely up the, flagpole with everything. Of course not. That's crazy. But
Mm.
yeah, some things it's just like, yeah, no, we're not going to do this. That's, but yeah, that kind of like, sort of anxious responding to everything. Like, I mean, like I was at teaching a uni course where it's like, one student complained about a text and it was like banned from a curriculum. Forget the fact that there were like 350 students enrolled in the course who didn't, 349 didn't complain. It's just like, no, you just ignore that one student. It's not because they're not a human being, but on the weight of the issue, it's like, no. Um, but yeah, people.
What was the book, by the way? What was the text?
Um, so I had this. It was an insignificant text. I mean, it's not anything that anyone would know of. It was like a tiny little 6-page graphic novel or like short story in like a drawing. It was yeah, it was just this weird. That's a whole, like, if I start talking about this, we've got to do like a whole hour on it because we really want to talk about it. But I'm not gonna go into it because it's just like it goes on and on. But that was fascinating to watch the response to that, and I'm like, what is happening?
It's like the mental patients in charge of the asylum, right? Like you're supposed to be academics, like you're supposed to be like serious scholars and whatever, and you're letting some fucking kid boss you around. Like you're above them in the hierarchy. Like, like why are you they don't know more than you. So all you should have done, like in that situation as the institution, is that like we have carefully selected these texts and they're there for a reason and we know better because you do. Like that's why they're there to learn from you,
But, at the same time, I agree with you, but at the same time, obviously they don't. Like, I think academics are so much to blame for everything that's gone wrong culturally. Like, because they cannot, for some reason, hold that basic, simple line of, I'm right, you're wrong. But it's not even I'm right, you're wrong. It's understanding what the job is. They started to kind of reconfigure why they existed and what a classroom was, and it's like you don't even seem to understand your own authority or respect that authority enough to like put it into action. It's the same as like I saw recently an article where a new author was talking about the wonderful, great experience that she'd had with her publisher, who forced her to do a sensitivity reading on her manuscript, and how illuminating this experience was because she didn't understand how offensive her manuscript was until she was told, and she's so glad that all these chapters were removed from it. And I'm like, what? Like, you're like some peasant who's been given a job to build a guillotine, and you're going, it's so great, employ me. It's so this opportunity I've got to build the machine of my own beheading. It's awesome. Like you're a idiot. Like, what are you saying? Yeah, no, it's like there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding of your position. Like that you're having someone pull the wool over your eyes and you're saying this is wonderful and you're signing your own death certificate. Like this is crazy. What are you doing? And I found academics to be like that, where they were like, hey, a student complained about this text. I guess I'm going to have to just undermine everything about this place that I work at and the course I teach in and my own job, because that makes sense. Like, what? What are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And
this actually, yeah, sorry. Keep going.
No.
Ranting.
I just hate it. I just hated having those people for peers because they're undermining you. They're undermining everyone. It's like, mate, just shut up. Tell that student, hey, that's the text.
Hmm.
That's it. That's all you
Yeah,
had to
and
say.
that's that. Like, yeah. And also like yeah, now like they've undermined it so completely, undermined their authority, which is pretty much after everything like is stripped away, that's pretty much what you have left in academia. You have a kind of like authority of knowledge, right? That the idea
Absolutely.
is that you've researched this topic so deeply and so with so much breadth that you have like a certain amount of legitimacy. With like large language models and AI and stuff like that, that is completely eroded because they've done so much self sabotage in terms of like being non hierarchical and removing their legitimacy and authority. What they've done now is that AI can sweep in and it doesn't really matter because it's like you're not like looking to take your place within that hierarchy. You're looking to tick boxes, which is all it is now. So why wouldn't students use AI? And you know, some staff use it now too. So it's like whatever. Like you let it. You basically just they all basically destroyed the institutions themselves by removing that idea of like scholarly authority there. But oh well,
I
they
agree.
did
I
that.
agree. You did it to yourself. You dug your own grave. And it's like I watched it happen. I saw people actively picking up a shovel and pitching in here. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing?
Mm, mm.
But yeah. But
But anyway, getting back to the memoir.
right.
And where how far along are you guys with it? And are you going to like what's the plan anyway? So you're going to sort of talk through how you've sort of written it together on the podcast. Do you think you're going to like sort of release it at
Well,
the like the end of the run of the podcast, or what's the plan there?
well, I had planned to publish it, but after this airs, obviously there won't be
Oh,
a
it's not that bad.
there won't be a
It's
publisher
not that bad. There's a
come
vibe.
near.
There's a vibe shift. It's fine. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll see that it's a good question because, we're still wrestling with that. I mean, look, like cards on the table, I fully intended to write it, complete it, and publish it. And I'm completely open to self-publishing and all those things. I did feel with this particular book that it was probably suited to traditional publishing just because of what it is. And so, I guess I still have some desire for that. But obviously, if that doesn't come together, we will just self-publish. But yeah, the goal is to like we've pre-recorded a fair amount of episodes. So we've been really working on this thing behind the scenes this year, but it will go as I said at the beginning, it starts June 22, but it'll go well into next year. I'm thinking it'll probably, if it doesn't wrap up mid next year, it will go through to Christmas 2026. It just depends
Wow.
yeah, it depends on a few things. And it depends on if somebody gets in touch and wants to publish, and that could change how the podcasting format goes. But yeah, no, like intend to get someone to publish it. For sure, that would be the first port of call. And I think the podcast is a good, it's a good advertisement for it, obviously. And that was kind of my strategy. I mean, like that was part of my thinking, part of my reasoning for doing it. But we are, I want to say we're like halfway through because Mum's kind of completed her manuscript, which I'm only kind of realizing that now. Like, I thought she had more to write, but I'm starting to see that no, I think she's written everything she needs to write, and it's actually on me to come back and integrate that with my own writing. there's a few, to use a terrible term, there's a few sort of literary aspects to the book that, I'm not keen on revealing until it's in like a printed form, like
Hmm.
which actually I guess opens up some conversation if you want to have it about memoir writing itself.
Mm. Yeah, I do.
Like there's memoirs that are just somebody telling their story in a really kind of basic way. And that's appropriate if your story is like absolutely wild and whatever. Sometimes you just need to tell it. Again, though, I think that'd probably be better as a podcast. Like, I've
Mm.
been thinking a lot more about form and like how you utilize a medium. So, like, I don't know. There's a lot of memoir that's really bad. Like, I mean, most books are bad, right? Like,
Mm.
there are so many books published every year. I don't mean that as like criticism. It's just true. There's so many books that are published every year, and it's like the majority of them are like fine. Um, and with memoir, there's a lot of people that are just telling their story. They're not really thinking about the writing so much. And
Mm.
like I say, that's appropriate depending on the story. But it also might be that you don't need to write a memoir. Maybe you do a podcast or you do something else. There's so many options available to you. Um, I was thinking about diaries recently, like published diaries.
Mm.
I always find
Helen Garner's. Have you read hers? They're good.
they're good. I think we have them in the house. I haven't read them. Um,
Mm.
tell me why they're good. I don't
Well,
mean
just
it
because
by
Helen
that.
Garner's a good.
Yeah.
I just like Helen Garner, and she's a good writer. And I think, basically, I think the diaries. I think she's always kept a diary, and I think that's part of why she's a good writer, because
Mhm.
she's like kept this daily practice up for decades now. And I'm pretty sure like Monkey Grip was just
Yeah.
basically her diaries that she collected and kind of edited the names and things like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, they're just good because they're solid, like descriptions of her reality.
Mhm.
And they can get a little bit poetic, but not in an overwrought way, like, because that's not her vibe. Like, she's very, matter of fact, emphatic. Yeah. So I've liked what I've read so far of hers. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, like I mean, we had a conversation about diary writing because Mum kept a diary, and you know, a lot of it just it wasn't. We thought there would be more in her diaries, but there wasn't
Mm.
really. But
It's a lot
then,
of minutia.
yeah, it was just sort of very
Mm.
mundane stuff. But
Mm.
but then at the same time, like around significant moments in family history, yeah, there were some interesting details in there. So, I'm
Mm.
not knocking it or praising it one way or the other. But I think we do have those Ghana diaries around. I should actually look at them. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you could do a memoir. I've been interested in I mean, I'm interested in all sorts of things. I'm interested in auto fiction is something I love as well, which is something people might
Mm.
consider. Like, you don't necessarily have to write a nonfiction book. You could use an aspect of
Mm.
your life and hide in it and create characters. Yeah.
I really, I'm skeptical on autofiction
Mm.
because
Yeah.
I
Okay.
really think that you could do more with it. I remember seeing a post actually recently where someone's like, autofiction is this, like, people will just invent like a composite character, invent dialogue and stuff like that. And but just generally have a period of your life that you're describing or whatever biographically. But like, where's the autofiction writer who is like throwing in a wizard and things like that? Like,
Yeah,
That'd be cool. I would love if people just did like really randomly outlandish shit in an otherwise like kind of normal auto-fictional book. That's great. That's a great idea. Um,
absolutely. I would love
Stretch
that.
the form, you know? Mm,
I agree.
mm,
I agree with that. Like,
mm, mm,
yeah, I sort of even in some of the memoir stuff from my perspective, I'm very kind of there are no wizards, but there's definitely like, I lived in a flat and there was a little mouse that would come through at a particular time in the morning. I was always like happy to see him, this little brown mouse. And
mm,
I sort of like I kind of turned him into a character. And it's like, yeah, I enjoy that kind of stuff. I enjoy people kind of
mm,
pushing things. So I guess, some of the conversations Mum and I are having when we're talking about memoirs themselves is we're talking about like, you know, what to do with the form and what to do with our book. Like, what is the final product really going to look like? And again, like I'm sort of playing my cards close to the vest a little bit with that because there's some aspects to it
mm,
that I think are really unique, but I don't want to reveal them before it's in like a published form.
mm.
And I think
I
that,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, already because it's co-authored, it's kind of a different form. Like, and
yeah,
I can see that you're gonna have to do it some way. Like, it's probably braided together or some like structurally or whatever. There's probably something like that going on, which
yeah,
is interesting in itself, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. But trying to find the story, quote unquote, within your
mm,
story, like that is such a challenge. And I think it's a challenge even when you're writing fiction because you set
mm,
out thinking, well, this book's going to be about this or that. I don't know whether you find this, but I always find,
mm.
or I have found, that a book is actually a lot smaller than you think it's going to be. Like, I think when you
Yes.
start, you think it's going to be this like sprawling thing, and you have probably too many characters. And I tend to find that actually the story of it is way smaller. Once you've gone through that first draft process and you're editing, you're like, this can be reduced. We don't need that scene. I've got too many characters. Let's just find the thing to emphasize here and stick with that.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and I think the
Well,
art makes
with the novel itself, I feel like more people need to embrace the form. And this is different to memoirs, obviously, but actually, when you look at it, the story part of the novel is very small, like you say. And then the bulk of the novel is actually digressions, meditations, like all different sort of things like that, like characters just doing something random, characters just hanging. Like that's basically the bulk of the novel. And the story is actually quite a small part of it, or at least not if not a small part, a very simple part of it.
Yeah, for sure. We watched a movie last night. We watched two films by the same director. This guy called Sean Durkin. He made
Mm.
I can never remember the name of it. It's like Martha Macy May Marlene or something like that. Do you remember that
Ah,
film?
yeah, yeah, that one. Yeah,
Um,
I remember that
20,
one. Yeah.
2011, and it was about a cult. And I don't know, I kind of had mixed feelings on it when I saw that. But since then, I've really
Mm.
enjoyed these other things he's done. He did a mini series called Southcliffe, which has got I forget the actor's name, somebody Harris. It's about a shooter in a small town in England, and he kills people. It's like a mass shooting event.
Mm.
Um, but then he's done a movie called The Nest in 2020, and his most recent film is The Iron Claw, which is about a wrestling family from 2023. We watched The Iron Claw last night, which is based on this family of wrestlers, the Von Erichs, and they were cursed, and I really believe they were. Like they had just incredible tragedy. They had a family of in the film. This is actually interesting about talking about reduction and finding plot and story. In real life, they had six sons, five of whom died. And then
Wow.
in the film, that's reduced to five sons, four die. Um, and so we watched that, and I thought it was great. And then I said to Bella, I was like, actually, we should watch The Nest. I'd seen it at the cinema in 2020 and loved it. It's got Jude Law, who I always like, and Carrie Coon. Um, and we went on and watched that. But just before we decided to do that, Bella said to me, like, what's it about? And I was like, it's not, it's about a family move.
Mm,
Like the dad takes a job and they move from the States
mm,
to the UK. That's all the film's about. Like that's the
mm,
story of the movie. They move. That's it. That is the extent of the story. But
mm,
the film is just populated with, like what you said, it's characters hanging out, characters fighting, it's atmosphere, and paranoia to a certain extent. It's mood, and it's it's about people and trying to sort of make something of yourself, and the effect of your upbringing, the effect of the past on who and what you want to be um, in the future. And so it's about all those things. But what's the plot? Well, a family moved from the US to the UK. That's it. There is nothing else.
mm,
There's like
mm,
there's almost like only two locations in the whole film. There's more, obviously, but there really is
mm.
two main ones. Um, and yeah, that was just making me think about writing as a process as well. It's like you often think your ideas are so big when you start, and it's like no, no, it's much much smaller. And the process is really one of just reduction and narrowing.
Yeah. Paring
Um,
back.
yeah,
The
absolutely.
thing about that as well is I actually think when you think it's so big like that, that is possibly related to you're actually in reader's mind because obviously
Yes,
if you're a writer, you're a big reader and you can read a very simple book and it can but it can still just open up a vast sort of life world to you that like I think that's the thing that you when you're going in to write a book, you're thinking of, and perhaps that's you're thinking of an effect rather than the book itself or like the plot itself. And I think that's probably what it is.
that's really well put. Like
Mm,
because it fills you.
mm,
Like when you consume it, it fills you up. And like the movie that I just described, The Nest, I haven't stopped thinking about it since I saw it at the cinema in 2020. Like I have a friend that I saw it with, and whenever we catch up, there's a scene with a horse. And if you see the film, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. And
mm,
every time we catch up, it's been like 6 years since we saw this movie, like 5 years. And I'm like, the horse, the nest, the horse. And he's like, yeah, I think about that all the time.
mm,
It's like we saw it one time, but that's what
mm,
art does. It's the effect of it, as you say. That's the effect. But when you're making it, you know, it, yeah, you're not in that space. It's a completely different animal. Um, it's also interesting that like big effect can come from something so small. Like the input is so little. One of the things that we've been talking about a lot with memoir writing is vignettes. So like small chapters, small scenes. Um, because when we started the process, Mum was she was obsessed with timelines and dates and all that sort of stuff, which is kind of this frantic thing that overtakes you when you attempt to write nonfiction. Is you're all about
mm,
dates and timelines and facts and stuff. But then once you're at a point where you're trying to make a book, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter when this happened,
mm,
and particularly with personal stuff, unless you have lived, the craziest life ever, most of the experiences you have had are relatively common. Even the less than common ones. It's like other people get divorced, other people experience death, other people experience all these things. And sometimes the most affecting thing you can write is just something very simple. Like,
Mm.
it was Saturday when my mother died, full stop.
Mm.
And that's like, that gets a lot of people. Fuck, yeah, it's just another day in the week when something big happens. You don't have to say that. You don't have to describe the room you were in or whatever, because and that distance between the input and the effect it's crazy, but it's a hard thing to figure out, I think, when you're in it. You're sort of like, and the process of putting this together has been like, we started with this kind of mad scramble to get facts and detail. And now I find myself in a position where I'm able to play with it a lot more.
Yeah.
And that is obviously much more fun. It's also a little bit more I feel the pressure to make it nice and get it right.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I love your point about vignettes too, because I really feel that with something that's not like, if you're writing a memoir or a novel or whatever, that's a little bit more, that's not really crazy plot heavy, right? And it's more a mood piece or whatever. I actually think vignettes are the preferred like structure there, because if it's not a like addictive, compelling like plot, like a Michael Crichton plot or something like that, I think vignettes help. Like, momentum is such an important thing. So I think vignettes, if they're like short, half a page, really help the reader like get through it, especially for something like a memoir, which I think, if it's not about a crazy life, so much of it I think is about accretion. Like, it's about you like collecting, all of the sort of rocks and stardust of people's lives. And that sort of orbiting and coalescing into something by the end. So I think what you're saying there is really wise about vignettes there, because it gives people that momentum that you kind of need to get that effect again,
100%. Yeah, I love that. I love the way you've described that. Like, a couple of the books that we're looking at on our alternating shows, one is Blue Nights by Joan Didion, and another is, but I've actually got it here.
Oh yeah,
Suzanne by Anais Barbeau Lavalette, and she's a French Canadian. And I like, first of all, with Didion, like, Blue Nights is so sparse, right? Like, it's so spare. And I've always been obsessed with vignettes since reading Play It As It Lays by Didion, right? And her ability to, just write those like standalone little scenes and images, but over the course of a novel or the course of a whole book, like 150 pages or so, it accumulates, it becomes something much bigger. And Didion she's just awesome. Like, I'm obsessed with her. But like, her ability to just increase like the meaning of the motifs and the images that she's using by kind of recycling sentences and all sorts of things. I mean, it's just incredible. But it's so light. Like, it's kind of, there's nothing to it. Like, she doesn't go into great detail. And one of the things that she does in Blue Nights that I loved was that she talks about she describes photographs, which is this thing I'm kind of obsessed with, because like, no photo when described is all that different from any others. It's usually two people standing in front of something or whatever. When you look at family photos, they're kind of meaningless. You put a lot of meaning in them because you know who those people are in relation to you. So when she describes them, she just describes them very simply. But again, it's something little. The input is small, but the effect is huge, because everybody has looked through a photo album and seen those same images. And so that relatability factor. Um, and Suzanne, the other book that we're looking at, it's incredible, and it's vignettes all the way through. It's really short chapters, but it's actually a novel, but it's a fictionalized biography of the author's grandmother, who she didn't really know her grandmother because her grandmother left her mother when her mother was a little girl, and then went and had kind of a crazy artist's life with some revolutionary art group in Quebec, and um, but she went back and she did all this research and sort of put this person's life back together. And it's interesting because she comes to it from a place of really not liking her grandmother because of the terrible effect her abandonment had on her mother. But she put something together that's very compassionate, very sweet, and goes back to what we were talking about with empathy. Like, the grandmother had a terrible effect on the family, but the author just works so hard to recreate the life and does it in such a way that, there's total empathy there, and makes great art in the process of empathizing and challenging what must have been a really raw nerve doing it. So there's a lot of pretty amazing stuff out there when you find it in the memoir world. There's a ton of shit, of course, but there's some pretty great stuff. Generally, though, I find that the smaller books and the shorter chapters and stuff seems to be the way to go for people. It seems to be the most affecting. Yeah,
it's that like being judicious with what you use and having a butterfly effect, like the Didion thing, like using implication to your advantage, I think, is part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you really have to say much about life. Other people live life. They get it. Like, you've kind of just got to trust that. You don't have to detail everything. Yeah. And
that's a young I think that's probably a young writer tick, actually, is that detailing everything, because it's like you actually haven't lived much life yet, so you don't actually get how not special you are with like your living life, because like it's so much when you're young, it's so like, all of this stuff is happening to you and you've got like lots of feelings and theories about all this stuff that's happened to you. But as you get older, you see that, this is all, a lot of this stuff has been said before, and you can use that to your advantage as a writer as well by like just gesturing towards implication and things like that, because people know. People who have lived life will know what you're talking about or what you're gesturing towards.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and you've got to just sort of, it's that thing about trusting your reader, and not sort of hitting people over the head too much.
Yeah. Well, I love trusting, the idea of trusting the reader, because that goes back to what we were saying before, which is that the reason that there's this like, there's sensitivity readers, there's like this kind of political correctness around like how will, saying a bad word or depicting something bad, like all of this comes from a mistrust of the reader. Like people do not believe that the reader can like take it. Like it's just really infantilizing idea of the reader that like they're not adults, like consenting to read this book. And if they are in some ways like frightened by something in a book, first of all, that's really fucking lame. But second of all, just stop reading. Like, you don't have to finish the book if you encounter something that you don't want to read about, I don't understand why there's all of this architecture and infrastructure that goes towards like actively mistrusting the reader, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would not just call it mistrust. I'd call it total disrespect. Like I think that publishers hate their readers and they think they're stupid.
Mm.
Like it's they have no respect for them. And they have
Mm.
no respect for anyone who isn't part of the one demographic they've identified as being their readers, which is, not to be,
Mm.
I don't mean this in a crass way, it's just typically like female baby boomers. Like that's who they think
Mm.
are the reading public. That's it. And it's like, yeah, sure, like they're a big part of it, and like they support publishers and they do a lot of great stuff. But they don't, publishers typically don't really make much effort to find anyone other than them. But,
Mm.
I mean, I think that goes back to, oh, damn, I've lost my point. It was something that we said before about, uh,
Not doing much by implication, that sort of stuff, or
no, sorry. It was just on that thing of trusting the reader.
Mm.
Oh no, sorry. It was you just said there is always the option not to read the book, right?
Mm.
Like if you get to something
Mm.
and you say this is offending me or this is not for me, you just close the book and that's the end of it.
Mm.
It goes back to what we were saying
Mm.
about ignoring something. Like sometimes, like
Mm.
there is an option to do nothing, and that isn't
Mm.
like callous. That is not dismissing problems. It's simply saying that, okay, here we are at this point in the road. For you, it might be you want to go and take another road or you want to go back. Like
Mm.
this idea that we all have to keep moving along the same road and keep adding to the road to make it accommodate to allow it to accommodate everybody. It's like maybe you're just not on the right road. Like
Yeah.
take a different path.
I like Quentin Tarantino's I like sentence, which is I just reject the hypothesis. Like, have you seen that clip where he gets like a reporter who gets up and like I think it's on the press tour for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Right.
and you know how have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So you know how Margot Robbie plays Sharon
Yeah.
Tate.
Yeah.
And one of the reporters, a female reporter, gets up and says, like, what do you, just asks him basically about how, like, she doesn't really have any lines in the film and whether this is, like, silencing her or whatever. And he just shuts her down by just saying, I just reject the hypothesis because, like, she clearly missed the point of what he was doing. And so, therefore, like he's not even going to engage with that. So it's like it's the same thing with like a crazy person who like is objecting to something in a book. Like just reject the hypothesis. Like you don't have to respond to it. Other than that, like.
But who? First of all, I don't understand the person who perseveres with something they don't like. Like as in, there's a limit to that. Obviously, there's a context to what I'm saying. But like, if the book isn't for you, why did you read it to the end and then contact the publisher and the writer and tell them how much you hate it? Like, you're insane. What are you doing? Like, you just close it.
Well, that's another thing too. Usually they don't actually read the book. It's like there's screenshots that are shared on social media of like a passage out of context and they're offended by that. And that's what generates the like snowball effect. So yeah. They don't even do the service of reading the book. Yeah.
I find it funny that publishers are doing all this work to make everything quote unquote accessible. At the same time, they're like losing readers. They're just hemorrhaging readers every day, hemorrhaging money every day. And it's like maybe in your effort to accommodate everybody, you've stopped publishing anything that people want to read. Maybe this is the problem. Like, it's weird to me that publishers don't court controversy. Like, if anything was going to bring people back into a bookshop, it would be publishing something radical that's highly offensive. Like, why aren't you doing that? It's weird. I've always found that strange. I've never understood why they're being the way they are when they seem to be kind of going under for the most part.
Well, every other industry does that. That's like, you know, people like I used to work for the Daily Mail, so which is tabloid newspaper, well, online site now, but like so many of the stories, like you could just tell that they were confected. Like
Mm.
some uh, big-breasted TikTok influencer like said something controversial, but like she kind of did that on purpose in order to get
Yeah, of course.
publicity, so get the Daily Mail to write about her. So like it's a whole ecosystem that maybe they just think they're too good for that sort of thing or something, that controversy is like beneath them or something like that, because they are really stuck up, all those publishing people. So
I agree. That's the only way I can kind of rationalize their sort of aversion to that. And it seems to be the high regard that they hold themselves in has really it's caused so many problems for them because they won't attempt
mm,
anything else. Everything's beneath them. And it's like, yeah, this is the problem. Um
mm,
yeah.
mm. So
Yeah.
with the podcast and the memoir, so like you said with your episodes and stuff, you'll be talking about like different elements, things you cover throughout your life in
Yep.
the memoir.
Yep.
What are some kind of topics that you kind of have spoken about? Just give the people a bit of a taste of what you might be talking about. And
Yeah,
is it
sure. Like,
specifically about your biography, or do you like use that as a jumping off point to speak about like more general stuff?
I think it's that thing of what I just said about like, we talk about ourselves, but in doing that, it's universal, right? It's relatable. So we talk about
Mm,
like, I think the first episode we talk mostly about families having narratives about themselves and
mm,
how that simultaneously, that's something that can bolster you is it, like if you have a narrative about yourself as being, a good person and hardworking, that can be really generative. But there's also those family narratives that get a little bit locked in and people start to get deluded and it stops them from questioning things that maybe they should have. And, it can facilitate all sorts of problems down the line. I mean, like our family, we sort of look at the fact that I'm trying to remember the conversation. I think we talk about the fact that, saw ourselves in a fairly self-righteous kind of outlook that we were, well, the victims, right? Like there was a victim narrative that was sort of entrenched and, that ultimately served nobody. So we look at things like that, talk about, parenting to a certain extent, the effect that parents have on us. We talk about, well, there's been this history of mental illness that's gotten uncovered in the family since we've been doing research that's been quite shocking and interesting, and also now in context, seemingly just unsurprising. Um, you know, we discovered that my grandfather's mother, she was coming down from rural Victoria to get electroshock therapy in the city in like this would be going back to like the 40s. And,
wow.
that was something that was never talked about. And it's like when you go back and you look at people's diaries and journals and various things, it's like, oh, all the descriptions of her kind of meet the criteria of somebody who is like, stricken with something, who's very, very depressed and sort of inward. And, maybe there's been some effect of either the therapy or, maybe it's just the depression, but you're looking at things in a different light. We talk also about like whether doing this at all is a good idea, like how much stock should we put into all this? Whether it's
Mm,
mental health and diagnoses, like we're in a culture of everybody self-diagnosing on the internet all the time. And we talk also about political correctness, some of the things we covered today about inclusivity and diversity, arts organizations, academia, publishers talking about paying lip service to being inclusive of everybody mentally ill and what have you. But is there real empathy there? Is there real diversity and inclusion of narratives that are, not politically correct or that are, um, I mean, look, one of the things that we talk most about, I guess, is we talk a lot about social class and we talk about shame and we talk about where those things intersect with or influence self-perception as well as how you interact with various, structures and apparatuses that you're surrounded by. Like I'm fascinated by the meeting point of like social class and mental health. Like I think that, I mean, obviously, depending on your background, you have radically different views of stuff like that. Like, I grew up where I believed totally in just willpower and hard work, and that was going to get me through everything. And that, you know, mental illness and mental health as just like a concept was really something for people with money because, to spend their time sort of lazing around on a psychiatrist's couch talking about their problems, it just felt like such a middle class thing to do and such a sort of an elite thing to do. And obviously my attitude towards that has changed considerably because I've had, problems of my own. But those narratives as well as those cultural narratives and cultural understandings, the way they inform you and influence you, that's really fascinating to me. So we talk about all of that stuff. Like there's a lot in the show, and our conversations have been really wide ranging.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We also, we also just talk about like why we're doing this, which is like, why do we find like writing a book and publishing it, like, why is that significant to do? And is it a good thing to do? I think mum questions now, like, she definitely put university education and writing and these things up on a pedestal. And,
And she did it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
for sure. But I think that's a complicated thing for her now, is like, and it's also a complicated thing for me, like how much did her placing so much value in those things inform my life and my desire for those things, So pretty broad range.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So like when it launches, where should people go to find it?
Well, we've got a few things set up. You can find us on Instagram at the Barrow Pod. We're also on Substack. I do some blogs and articles. The Barrow Pod. What is it? thebarrowpod.substack.com. I think that's how those are formulated. But yeah, wherever you download podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google, whatever it's called, Google Music, Google,
all of them,
whatever.
I don't think they do. I don't think they do Google Podcasts anymore. It's something else.
I think it's YouTube Music now. YouTube Music is the go. So we're all those things, but the Instagram account is kind of like a good little hub as well as the Substack. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'll link all of that in the show notes. And yeah, good luck with it. Look forward to the first episode, which is launching June 22nd.
That's right. Oh, and just the other thing, we're on YouTube as well. So I'm in addition to the audio only, I'm releasing unedited video versions of the podcast, like the Saturdays after the show's released. So yeah.
Oh, cool.
So that's
awesome.
youtube.com/the Barrow Pod.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Toby. It's a great chat. We always have great chats. And yeah, we'll have you on again soon, I guess, and maybe after it launches and see how that goes.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to come back. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it'd be good to have you like on our show or something. Like we could talk about writing process and various things. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
No worries.
See you soon.
Bye.